Hi everyone, it's Pete here. Welcome to part 1 of my build guide of this Tamiya TGS racing truck, which is on the TT-01 Type E chassis. In this video I'll be building the chassis, and in the second part I'll be completing the body and taking it for a little test drive. Okay, let's get cracking with step 1, which is attaching the spur gear. So once you've got all the right bits together, the only tricky bit about this step really is to make sure the little MA11 shaft doesn't fall out while you sandwich it between the GB2 part and the GB5, which is the spur gear. Step 2 is attaching the prop shaft and the battery holder post. Now this is kind of awkward and you have to angle the drive cups upwards to get the prop shaft in. Step 3 is attaching the motor, and I'm going to be using this Razor 10 4600 kV brushless one. You need to make sure you use the right holes on the motor plate for the size of pinion you're using. Step 4 is putting the motor into the chassis. At this point make sure the pinion and spur gear are meshing properly. Step 5 is putting together the rear differential. I'm going to use AW grease that will make the diff sticky and should make the truck drift a little bit. Step 6 is putting the differential into the back of the chassis. Make sure the bearing's seated properly so the GB1 bevel gear can go all the way onto the end of the prop shaft. Step 7 is attaching the rear suspension arms. Now the A5 part gets attached properly in a later step, but it's worth just putting a screw in it in this step just to make it easier so it doesn't fall off. Also with this step make sure the suspension arms are the right way round depending on what wheelbase you want, either 251 or 257. With this one it's the 257. Step 8 is putting the rear axles into the A6 uprights. Step 9 is attaching the rear bumper. Step 10 is attaching the uprights to the suspension, putting in the drive shafts and also attaching the body posts. Which body posts you need depends on which body you're using, in this case it's the B5s. Step 11 is just pushing the little P7 part into the B9 and B10 front suspension arms. Step 12 is the front differential, which is the same as the rear one. Step 13 is very similar to step 6, but there's an extra bearing and the P3 part. Step 14, attaching the front arms, very similar to step 7. Step 15 is attaching the front bumper. Step 16 is putting together the front uprights. Step 17 is attaching the uprights to the suspension, putting in the drive shafts and attaching the body posts. Step 18 is assembling the dampers. I'm actually upgrading to these oil dampers, so I just need to check the kit one for length. I'm going with a single hole piston top, these springs and 1000 CST oil. I found this to be a good combination in the past, so I'll see how it goes and I can always change it later. Step 19 is attaching the dampers to the chassis. Instead of the step screws that you get with the kit, I'm going to use the ball connectors that you get with the oil dampers. Step 20 is putting together the steering arms. I've got bearings to replace the A2 spacers. Step 21 is attaching the foam bumper. Step 22 is attaching the steering linkage. Now step 23 we need to charge the battery, because in step 24 we're testing the radio gear and centralising the servo. Also in step 24 we're attaching the servo saver and the steering linkage to the servo. And then we need to choose which way round these A4 parts go depending on the size of the servo you're using. Step 25 we're putting the electronics into the chassis. This is a good chance to give it a little test to see if everything works okay. That all seems fine. Now when I came to fit this D1 part I found the motor wires were kind of in the way. Now with these brushless motors you get sort of multiple hole positions, so I just put it around to the next set of holes. I've left off this D8 motor cover. Step 26 we're gluing the tyres on. I'm just using regular pound shop super glue. Step 27 is putting the wheel hexes and wheels on. This truck has got a back bumper that you need to paint and attach to the back of the chassis. Step 28 is putting the battery in and putting the battery holder on. So that's it for the chassis, and it looks pretty good to me. So the next step is to build up the body, and I'll be doing that in the next video. I'll also be taking it for a little test drive, but in the meantime thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.